Hey guys, I'm Jamison, and this is how I cook. Welcome to my kitchen. We are making lamb chops. That's right. I'm going to show you guys how I put together a rack of lamb chops and turned it into an amazing entree. I'm going to show you guys how to make Greek seasoning. I'm going to show you guys how to clean up the bones on the lamb chops, how to slice them, and then I'm going to show you how I sear them and finish them in the oven. It's a super easy recipe, guys, and it'll add a wonderful dimension to your next meal. Up next on This Is How I Cook. All right, guys, here are our ingredients. Before we get too far into this video, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications so that people can find this video and you'll also know about when I release new videos to this channel. All right, so our seasoning blend that we're gonna use to make our Greek seasoning, it's pretty simple. You can also go and buy Greek seasoning from the store, but I prefer to show you guys how to make it from scratch with a combination of spices that you're gonna probably have in your kitchen. We've got kosher salt, we've got ground black pepper, we've got some onion powder, we've got some red pepper flake, we've got some oregano. This is the star of Greek seasoning. This is what you taste primarily when you get all the different blends you can buy. And then lastly, we've got some garlic powder. These are all going to be basically a 1-to-1 ratio, except the oregano. We're going to use 2 parts oregano. And then lastly, we've got some dried rosemary here. You can use fresh rosemary as well. And as you can see, we've got this beautiful rack of lamb. And these are going to be cut down into chops. These are going to be basically your rib chops. They also make lamb chops that are loin chops that come from what's essentially the T-bone of the lamb. But for my presentation demonstration, we're going to be using these rib chops. 2 additional ingredients we're going to be using on our lamb chops to prepare them and season them. We're going to use some olive oil to actually coat the lamb chops. And then we're also going to use a little bit of red wine vinegar to get the lamb chops seasoned with a little bit of acidity. So the first thing I like to do when I'm making my lamb chops is that on the back of this rib rack, you've got a membrane that I'm going to want to pull off. And so this membrane needs to come off, and this helps your lamb chops have a better seasoning on the backside. And also, it just gives them a better texture and mouthfeel when you actually cook them. So the way we do this is we can come in here and start at the tip and just kind of work our knife underneath this membrane. Now, if you've ever cooked, pork ribs, this is one of the steps in making pork ribs, or at least how I make my pork ribs, is I pull that membrane off. And if you're lucky, it's a pretty thin membrane on the lamb, but you just want to take your time and get your fingers underneath it. And as you can see, it's coming off pretty clean. And then I'm just taking my time and I'm going to pull this off. That's beautiful. It came off really clean. All right, now that we got this off, this is what you should see on the backside. So the next step I'm going to do is, all we're going to do here is cut in between the bones. You want to look here, and you can see that there's sort of this little bone that kind of protrudes in between each of the major bones of the rack. And you want to take a boning knife. This is what this is, a boning knife. You can use a chef knife and do this, but a boning knife makes this a little easier because it's flexible. And you just want to kind of work your way in between the bones down here. This is where I'm looking at, right here. See that bone? I'm going to work my way through with my knife to miss that bone. And we come back and do the same thing again. And those are beautiful lamb chops that we're producing here, right? Beautiful lamb chops. Now, one of the things we can do is, if you want to make like what they call a king chop or a king cut. A king cut is a thicker cut lamb chop. So the way to do that, or a thicker cut chop in general, the way to do that is bring your knife, and we're gonna get as close to this bone as we can. So we come in here and we cut right close to that other bone. And so once again, we want to take our time and maneuver our blade, and you have to sometimes move that tip around to see that bone, but you just want to maneuver your blade around that bone. And you can see here that this chop is significantly thinner than this chop. And then we left a lot of meat on this side of this chop, so we're going to come on the inside and get closer to the second bone, away from this bone, and do the exact same thing. Come right around. Watch that bone at the end. Sometimes you have to just maneuver. But if you follow that bone, you're there. And now what you have is a king chop, right? It's significantly thicker than the other one. But the only problem I have with the king chop, typically, is that it makes for a really thin chop on the other side. So some people call this the queen chop because typically ladies might like smaller portions. That's a sexist take, I'm sure, but that's what that term means. So you've got the king chop, which is a thicker cut. You got the queen chop, and so now what we want to do. This can be left on, doesn't have to come off. But if you're making this and you want this to look really nice for company, what you can do is take your blade of your knife and you can scrape this bone. And scraping the bone makes this really clean. And what I'm doing is kind of nicking that little bit of meat there that's on there. And then boom. Now you've got a really clean bone that presents well on the plate. Also, before you start seasoning and preparing your lamb chops, preheat your oven to 425. We're gonna start the lamb chops on the stove and then finish them in the oven, 425. Okay, we got our lamb chops cleaned up. So the first thing we wanna do is we're gonna start by adding a little bit of olive oil to these. And we just want enough olive oil to help coat the lamb chops so that our seasoning blend adheres better. Next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna start with a generous application of pepper. I find that I oftentimes under-season my food with pepper, so I'm gonna be very generous here with the pepper. Now remember, if you're gonna take all of these and combine these spices into a lasting rub that you can use going forward, into like some type of a container that you can put the spices in so that you can have it on hand to reuse it, then just remember everything's a 1-to-1 ratio, except for we're gonna add in 2 parts oregano. So here's some kosher salt to help season up our lamb chops. Next, we're going to apply some of this beautiful onion powder. Next is some garlic powder here. We're going to put in a healthy dose of our oregano. We're going to come back in with some rosemary. This is dried rosemary, but you can use fresh rosemary. And then I want a little bit of heat, just a little bit. So I'm going to put in some red pepper flake here. So now we get our hands in here and we give this all a good mix, and we want to combine all of this onto our lamb chops. Be sure to take your lamb chops and use them to collect the seasonings in the bottom of the bowl. And then the last thing we've got to add, I almost forgot it, we're going to add a splash of this red wine vinegar. Just a splash, just to brighten this up a little bit for our marinade. And then we're going to finish tossing this together to make sure it all gets coated nicely. And that's what you want. You want the seasonings all blended nicely onto your lamb chops, and you're good to go. So the final thing is we're going to sear these in our cast iron skillet and transfer these into our oven set to 425. So we got our lamb chops seasoned up, and so I've got my cast iron skillet. The reason I like using a cast iron skillet for this is that I can take this directly from the stove and transfer it into the oven. So because we're going to be searing at a pretty high temperature, I'm going to use some avocado oil, which has a very high smoke point. And this gives me the ability to cook my lamb chops at a very high temperature for the sear. So our skillet has began to have wisps of smoke come off of it. And I like to redistribute the oil when that happens. And so then all we're going to do is add our lamb chops. And we want to listen for the sear. If we don't hear that sizzle, then our skillet's not ready for our lamb chops. All right, so these have been searing for a few minutes. And what we want to do now is begin to check to see how they're browning. And so I start in the middle, and I'm going to take a look. And you can see we've got a beautiful sear developing on these lamb chops. All right, so we transferred our lamb chops from our stove into the oven. We're going to let those go for probably about 10 to 15 minutes until they reach your preferred doneness. If you like a medium preparation on your lamb chops, then take them out sooner, so 10 minutes. If you like them well done, no shame in that, then let them go 15 minutes or longer. So me, I'm probably gonna let these go another 10 minutes and then take them out and let them begin to rest, and I'll show you guys what the final product looks like. All right, so while we're waiting on our lamb chops, let me show you guys a little side dish that I like to eat with my lamb chops. I'm gonna do some sautéed asparagus. So what we're gonna start with is more of our avocado oil, and I've got these nice spears of asparagus here, and we're just gonna put these into the skillet. And so what we're gonna do here with this asparagus is we're just gonna brown this a little bit, saute it. So now I reduce the heat. I'm gonna come in here with some pepper. And since I've got this beautiful garlic powder here already handy, we'll toss some of this in. Now, I'm using some olive oil because I want flavor. I like the flavor of olive oil. So I'm not adding any more heat to the pan. So I'm gonna just drizzle this with a little olive oil, and then we're gonna lightly toss this. All right, so the first thing we wanna do is start with a nice bed of this beautiful asparagus that we sauteed and cooked around. And so what I like to do is take my time and start in the center of the plate and lay my asparagus down. If you guys could smell this, this smells amazing. And so we come in, we lay down a nice, beautiful bed of asparagus, and we just kind of want it to lay nicely there. So that's perfect. Now we take our beautiful lamb chops that have been resting. I took these out after probably, I'd say about 8 minutes. I'm gonna take this really big one I made, that king chop. And I'm just gonna come in here and plate it sort of this way here. I'm gonna lay it just like that. Sort of a crisscross. That's beautiful. And that is my take on lamb chops. All right, guys, you saw the lamb chops. Time for the taste test. Oh, man. Oh my goodness. Wait a minute. That first bite might have been a fluke. Hold on. Let's see if we got another one in here like this. Oh. Moist, flavorful, rich flavor, perfect spices, just a hint of heat from that red pepper flake, and you've got this beautiful bouquet with the oregano, the rosemary, all those aromatics, the garlic powder, the onion powder. Hands down, one of my favorite things in the kitchen to cook. It's a quick meal, doesn't take long to get them ready, probably in total, really, if you're moving fast, about 20 minutes. Guys, thank you so much for watching another episode of This Is How I Cook. Be sure to hit that subscription button and turn on those notifications, and tell your friends and family that there's a channel on YouTube that makes a lot of these dishes really approachable, simple, and easy to understand. Guys, I gotta get back to these lamb chops. You guys take care and tell somebody about the channel. This is amazing. Wait a minute. Cut this in. Find another one. I was only gonna eat 3 of these. Give me a little bit of this asparagus. Every time. Every bite.